Great leaders are great listeners. Great leaders don't walk into a room intent on speaking. They walk into a room intent on learning. When you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, you want to try to check 3 boxes. Number 1, you want to do something that you love. Number 2, you want to do something that you're great at. Number 3, you want to do something that allows you to make a positive impact in the lives of others. There really is no such thing as an overnight success. When you look at people who have attained greatness, greatness takes time, greatness takes effort, greatness requires a lot of, candidly, dedication.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. I'm Moshe Popack, and today I talk with Adam Mendler. Adam is a mindset and leadership expert who is the creator and host of the hit podcast, 30-Minute Mentors. Adam's interviewed more than 500 of America's most successful leaders and has written extensively on business and leadership. Hi, Adam, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Moshe, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
There you go. This is going to be fun. So I know you've had over 200 episodes on your podcast, interviewing celebrities and athletes and business leaders. How would you sum up, what would be the X factor that makes a great leader?
So many. Moshe, we could spend the entire day just talking about this one question. I'll give you a few. Great leaders are great listeners. Great leaders don't walk into a room intent on speaking. They walk into a room intent on learning. Great leaders are continually trying to improve, continually trying to get better. Recognize that whatever got them to where they are today isn't necessarily going to get them to where they want to be tomorrow. Something that I've learned that's been really interesting to me, the most successful leaders are the people who are most hungry about becoming better, about taking that next step. They don't look at themselves and say, I'm successful, I've made it, therefore I've arrived. On the contrary, they are continually trying to get better, continually trying to improve. It's that growth mindset that allows them to stay at the top. That's one big component of what makes great leaders great.
I wanna go to that because honestly, I think that's profound. Because even if you have these successes, right, and it's complete illusion, it's great, right? So you have the financial win, right? I see this all the time, right? And you can get satisfied. You can get lazy. We're naturally lazy, right? And and I love that you said that because your whole life, if I think of life, it's for the purpose of personal growth and development, to grow what your personal journey is. I know the hard days that I have are days at this point that I'm not pushing myself, not tinkering, not growing, being lazy to what what my potential could be. So that definitely is to keep that in mind, that it'll never end. It'll end when we're not here anymore, right? So if you want to have true meaning and success and fulfillment, it'll exist probably your entire life. The mindset will exist.
Moshe, I'm with you. And a lot of it really comes down to how are you spending your time? How are you channeling your energy? What are you moving toward? What matters to you and why? And are you pursuing that? So something that I share with all audiences that I speak to, whether it's a listener on my podcast or whether it's someone that I'm speaking to when I'm giving a keynote, when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, you want to try to check 3 boxes. Number 1, you want to do something that you love. Number two, you want to do something that you're great at. Number three, you want to do something that allows you to make a positive impact in the lives of others. And if you can check all three of those boxes, it doesn't feel like work. You can wake up first thing in the morning and you're going to be fired up to get at it. You're going to be fired up to go as hard as possible as you can to make things happen. And it gets dark out, you're not going to be tired. You're just going to want to continue to work at it. You compare that attitude, that mindset, that perspective, which is real. Moshe, I know you have it. I have it. So many of us have it. Every person who you've brought on to this podcast has it. If they didn't, you wouldn't bring them on to this podcast. Everyone who I bring on to my podcast is there. The most successful people are there. You compare that to a place where we've all been. I know you've been there. I've been there. You're not checking those three boxes. You're not doing something that you love. You're not doing something that you're great at. And or you're not doing something that allows you to make a positive impact in the lives of others. I've had jobs where, I'm sure Moshe, same way, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you're completely drained. Drained from doing what? From working too hard or from not checking those three boxes? So every single one of us has the same amount of time in the day. It's not like you have 28 hours and I have 24 hours. We all have the same amount of time. It ultimately comes down to how are we spending our time? And are we spending our time on activities that are enabling us to check those three boxes? One last quick point. There are plenty of things that each of us can do that allow us to check those three boxes. It's not just one thing. In your case, you have a real estate business that allows you to check those three boxes. You also have a podcast that allows you to check those three boxes. But there are probably lots of other things that you could think of as we're talking that you could be spending your time on that don't check those three boxes. In my case, there are plenty of things that I do, whether it's keynote speaking, whether it's 30-minute mentors, whether it's teaching at UCLA, that allow me to check those three boxes. There are plenty of things that don't, and those are the areas in my career where I've tried to move on from.
Well, I mean, I always think about like schooling, I have big family, kids, and I think about that a lot. You have to be great at something. Would you, for kids nowadays or coming out of school, right? So some kids are just good at, I don't know, could be good at math or at basketball or something in a certain space, and then meanwhile the system sends them on a trajectory. You got to get straight A's on all of these classes. I think that to be specific, to be great at something, can you learn to be great at something? I don't know if that'll last. There's always a question that I contemplate in my mind.
Yeah, this is a topic that I've explored with so many of the most successful people, and there's a lot to it. Greatness doesn't happen overnight. Greatness takes time. I did an interview with a guy who's from a part of the country not too far from where you're from, Stevie Van Zandt. And Stevie, people may know him from The Sopranos, people may know him from the E Street Band, but one of the all-time greats in a number of different areas, also a great entrepreneur. We spent a lot of time talking about how to attain greatness. And something that Stevie shared, which is really interesting, is that we have this mindset that puts us in a place where we try to achieve things very quickly. And there really is no such thing as an overnight success. When you look at people who have attained greatness, greatness takes time, greatness takes effort, greatness requires a lot of, candidly, dedication. And if you look at, just going to the examples that you gave, you mentioned basketball. Look at the greatest basketball players. Michael Jordan wasn't born the greatest basketball player in the history of basketball. He just wasn't. He wasn't the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. He was a really good college basketball player, but he wasn't the greatest college basketball player of all time. When Michael Jordan got into the NBA, he was really good, but it took him time to become the Michael Jordan that all of us know. And we can literally go through every single great basketball player and say that about every single one of them. And we can say that about every athlete. We could say that about every person who has attained greatness in their craft. It takes time, it takes dedication. You can't do it overnight.
And I always say also, because I think about all three of the points, the love, greatness, and the impact. I think about that all the time. I think that love is completely, and I agree with you, completely necessary, because 100% of the time, and I've said this before on the show, things will get tough in business. Let's just take the business box or life, or it could be relationships. If there's not love, passion, love, what you're doing, so it's able to negate all the negative emotions and all the negative feelings that you have, and you still continue on the path. Otherwise, because you haven't done anything, if you give up. Right? So I always think about that as well, the love. To really, really love. It doesn't matter you're sleeping, you're not eating, all of that. That drive comes from that love. So I think that that's brilliant.
There are plenty of reasons to look around and say, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard? Why am I going at 110%? Why am I going at 100%? Why am I going at 90%? And if you're not driven by some form of higher calling, if there's not a real purpose behind what you're doing, if you don't love what you're doing, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're going to burn out, and you're going to burn out quickly. But when you deeply believe in what you do, when you love what you do, when what you do is fun, when the line is blurred between work and joy, when Moshe, in your case, is this work or is this a hobby? Maybe it's a little bit of both, and that's what it should be. And for the people, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, is basketball work or is basketball a hobby? The answer is it's both. And for those people, that's how they become great.
And then on the opposite side, if you have a leader who's just not a good leader, how can that ripple affect the entire business and the people? It's just one person. So you would think, oh, it's no big deal. But what have you seen, like the detrimental effects of a poor leader?
Yeah, Moshe, you're bringing up huge topics, and these are great topics. And this is another topic that, again, we could literally spend all day, maybe all month talking about, and that's toxic leadership. And the first thing to understand is that there are different types of toxic leaders, different types of bad leaders. So, taking a step back, all bad leaders are deeply detrimental to an organization, to the people around you. Most people don't quit companies, don't quit organizations. They quit their manager. They quit the person who they're working for. So a bad manager drives away bad people. I've seen it. You've seen it. We've all seen it. The numbers say it. So there's no denying it. We all understand it. But what I try to talk about and what I try to explain is that there are different types of bad leaders. One category of a toxic leader is someone who is a toxic human being, someone who is just a bad person. We all, when I say that, we all think immediately of people who we know, maybe people who we've been around, who are just toxic human beings, who are just fundamentally not good people. And they ascend to leadership positions, and no one wants to be around them. Everyone wants to be as far away from them as possible. And eventually, people are going to quit them. People are going to be demotivated. It creates a disastrous situation. That's pretty clear. But what's more common in my experience, and what's actually a bigger problem, is the bad leader who's actually a good person. The bad leader who isn't evil, isn't mean, isn't a bad human being, but just doesn't know how to be a good leader, never learned how to be a good leader, never received the proper training, wasn't born with the skill set, wasn't born with the predisposition to lead people, and didn't learn along the way. There's the big question, is leadership something that you're born with, or is it something that you can learn along the way? And the answer is it's both. Some people are born with strong leadership qualities. Some people aren't, but every single one of us can learn how to become better leaders. And a lot of people never learn how to become better leaders. And those people are toxic leaders. And those are the people who are trainable. Those are the people who are coachable. The first group, we just need to get rid of them. We need to get them as far away from the workforce as possible. The one thing that maybe we can try to do is get them to work for our competitors so they can blow up their companies. But the second group, let's work with them.
Yeah.
Let's identify them. Let's train them. Let's figure out, because they're coachable. Let's figure out how to take the good qualities they have, take the bad qualities they have, identify the bad qualities, identify the blind spots, and make them good leaders. It's possible.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen through coaching, and people that are open, right? You talk about listening, at least, right? They're able to hear, not get offended by constructive criticism, right? Just coming from a good place. But I've definitely seen that. What would you say? I know you have, your podcast, 30-Minute Mentors. We talked about before, over 200 episodes. What would you say is like? First, tell us about a little bit about the podcast,
Sure.
the idea behind it.
Yeah. So I started the podcast a while ago. As of today's recording, and I know that this episode is going to run in a couple of months, but as of today's recording, we're at 230 episodes. I started the podcast about 4.5 years ago. And when I started the podcast, the idea was to bring together the best network of mentors possible to a very wide range of people. So every week I do an interview with one of the most successful people in America, Fortune 500 CEOs, founders of household name companies, Hall of Fame athletes, 4-star generals and admirals, major political leaders, governors, senators, cabinet members. And what I do is I spend around 30 minutes. I'm not the world's most punctual person, but I try to keep it as close to 30 minutes as possible, going one-on-one with the most successful people on how they have been able to make it to the top. But more importantly, their best advice for anyone listening on how to become more successful in their lives, more successful in their careers, and more successful as leaders. And my listeners really run the gamut. It's a very wide range of people, from emerging leaders, and I define emerging leaders very broadly. I define emerging leaders as people ranging from college students to mid-career professionals. That's one group. The second group of listeners are people like the guests on my podcast. A lot of people who listen to 30-Minute Mentors are CEOs, founders, investors, board members, military leaders, people who have reached the highest levels of leadership and are trying to figure out, how do I become a better leader? And how better to figure out how to become a better leader than by learning from the most successful leaders. So it's a little bit about 30-Minute Mentors.
So what would you say if you were to close your eyes and think about it? The best, I'd say, piece of advice or the best episode. I know there's top, but just what was something that really struck you? You're like, this person said this, and that really changed the trajectory of my life, type of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the honest answer is that, and Moshe, you could probably relate to this just having done so many podcast interviews. What I find is that just about every episode, there's one nugget like that I pull from the episode. Maybe in some episodes there are two, but usually there's that one nugget that I take away from every episode where I'm like, wow, that's the nugget that I didn't think of, that I hadn't heard before, that is changing the way I'm thinking, that I could apply to my life, that I could apply to my own business. And with every interview, there's something a little bit different. So it just varies for across all the interviews. I mean, I could give you some examples, but to answer the first question, which is my best interview, my favorite interview, that's a question I get asked a lot. I'm sure it's a question that you get asked a lot. Just once you hit a certain number of interviews, who's your favorite? And initially, I really struggled to answer that question because, I mean, I literally am interviewing the most successful people in America. And every interview, I'm so fired up about. I'm excited. Like I have an interview tomorrow. I'm excited about it. I'm fired up. Last week, I recorded a couple of interviews. Every single one of these, how do you compare? But the answer that I have been giving for a while now is that, when I was a kid, I didn't grow up, and Moshe, maybe we're the same way. You're going to have to tell me. I didn't grow up idolizing CEOs. I didn't grow up idolizing entrepreneurs. I didn't grow up idolizing political leaders. But the people who I have had on 30-minute mentors, who I grew up idolizing, those have had a little bit of extra meaning for me. So to give you a couple of examples, just passed away recently, may he rest in peace, the great Bill Walton.
Sure.
I grew up watching Bill Walton call games on NBC, call games for the Clippers, then call games for ESPN. Truly a one-of-a-kind broadcaster, a one-of-a-kind personality. I then read the breaks of the game right after college. One of the best books I've ever written by David Halberstam, my favorite writer of all time. And the breaks of the game is partially a Bill Walton biography. And I met Bill Walton at a conference, whole long story, but years later, Bill Walton came on 30-minute mentors. And that had some extra special meaning for me, just someone who I grew up really idolizing as a kid. Another example, I did an interview with Joe Madden, and I'm a huge Angels fan and been a rough time for the Angels. That's a pretty evergreen statement. You could hold this episode and run it 20 years from now, probably still be accurate. But Joe Madden, longtime coach for the Angels. When I was a kid, he was a coach for the Angels. He was the manager for the Angels for a bit. And I grew up, I mean, just as a kid, I loved Joe Madden. As an adult, I love Joe Madden. Having Joe Madden on 30-minute mentors. Another example, David Robinson, the Admiral. Man, watched hours and hours and hours of the Admiral play basketball. And in each of these cases, Joe Madden, Bill Walton, David Robinson, these are people who I just knew from afar, from watching them on TV. And having the chance to have them on 30-minute mentors was really cool for me. But what was even cooler was, as I got to know them, seeing that they were just as cool, if not cooler, in real life than what I envisioned them to be. Just incredibly high quality human beings. Not only incredibly interesting, but interested asking me questions about myself, trying to get to know me. We could spend hours and hours talking about each one of them, but really generous in terms of their approach toward me, and very incredible people.
That's what I think the people have to understand. We're living in a society that we think certain things are, these people, they have it understood, they know, but really the real people, like hold them like the goats in all industries, right? It could be in business, and that really, really did that journey, that personal journey on themselves for years and years and years, right? Like the greatness that you talk about. And probably the nuggets that you get from each interview, it's probably their own personal struggle. It's their own dynamic with the world that they're going through, and it'll come out. And wow, that was profound because you could see it's like they worked that thing through for years and came out with something, and that's their whole definition. That's their whole core of why they do what they do.
What's interesting about that, Moshe, is just using David Robinson as an example. If you go back and listen to that interview, and that was one of the earliest interviews on 30-Minute Mentors, I spent the first portion of the interview initially talking to David Robinson about his journey, his background, his upbringing. I joke with him about his nickname, the Admiral. I've interviewed other admirals, and it was fun conversation. We talked about basketball. He was enjoying it. But then I started talking to him about his work in the community and his level of passion, energy, excitement hit a different level. And I was able to observe that as much as Dave Robinson loves basketball, that isn't what his life is all about. His life is about service to the community. That's what drives David Robinson. That's what fuels David Robinson. That's what he is all about. And I mean, that's, to your point, 100% on the money. The most successful people understand they're human beings. I think that there's a misconception out there that people are born great. People are born with this predetermined path where, okay, I'm born with greatness, and at age 30 I'm going to do this, and age 40 I'm going to do this, and age 50 I'm going to do this. But a big takeaway from all these conversations with the most successful people, there really is no linear path to success.
Right.
The most successful people have the same highs and lows and ups and downs that we all have. In many cases, their highs and their lows are much higher and much lower than ours, much more public than ours because they're public figures and because they're more out there than the rest of us are. But their journey is really not all that different than our journey in that sense. Everyone experiences highs and lows. Everyone experiences ups and downs. There is no linear path to success. Resilience is essential to being able to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. I love what you said about the highs are higher and the lows are lower. So if you choose to have, again, those grand goals, or that the vision of what you're going to do, that should be part of your understanding that there will 100% be days where anybody searching, I remember that from Les Brown, anybody searching for greatness, will definitely want to quit. Anybody, right? Because the low, and that low point, that is debilitating. And then you talk about resilience. To go past it, even though you can't see it at that moment. Just say, oh, why don't I just quit? Too painful, right? And the reason why they became great is because they continued resiliently on the path, consistently over time.
Yeah,
That's
I think back to when I left corporate America and started life as an entrepreneur. And it's a very different feeling. Running your own business, being an entrepreneur, the highs and lows that you experience are night and day compared to working in corporate America. And it was something that I just didn't understand. A lot of it is artificial because it's not like you're going out and really, like every single day, you really shouldn't be feeling as high as you do or as low as you do. But it's just the psychology that comes with the work that you're doing. And a big part of it is understanding that these are the rules of the road. If you want to play in this game, you got to understand that these are the emotions that come with it. And it's a big part of entrepreneurship.
yeah.
One of the reasons why I love doing what I do is I have a pretty eclectic background. I've worked in corporate America. I've worked for some of the biggest companies out there. I worked for a huge hedge fund. I worked for a huge bank and then started a number of different businesses in a number of different industries. So I have this background of living in the real world, being in all these different seats and being able to see things from different seats at the table. You want an interesting nugget? You asked me about things that I've learned from different episodes. One of my earliest guests on 30-Minute Mentors, a great guy, General Ronald Hoover, and something he shared in that episode, which is something I wish I learned when I was getting my MBA. Anytime you sit in a room, like when I was in business school, for example, we always had the same seat that we sat in. We had our name tag, and it's like, you sit here. And he said, anytime you go into a room, always sit in a different seat. Don't sit in the same spot every time. When you sit in a different part of the room, your perspective is going to change. You're going to see things a little bit differently. You're also going to sit next to different people. You're going to talk to different people. Build a bigger Rolodex. That's just one little nugget, but that was something that, man, that interview could have been 4 years ago. Who knows? But I still think about that.
I love that. And tell me, what is something sitting today? What is something that you're grateful for?
Being here with you right now. The fact that we're able to do this right now, it's 11 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles, and I'm sitting here with you doing this. This is amazing. Let's just take a step back and recognize that we're able to do this right now. How can you not have gratitude for just being able to do this? Sitting here in a comfortable chair. I used to be in the office furniture business, so I used to sell these chairs. I know that this is a good chair because I used to sell this exact chair, and not anymore. But being here in a comfortable room in Los Angeles, you're in Florida, we're in great places, great weather, getting the opportunity to talk about these topics. At the end of the day, what's more important than this? These are topics that, if taken to heart, will allow every single one of us to get that much better, will allow every single one of us to not only take the next step in our lives and in our careers, but will allow us to become better leaders and to more effectively empower those around us, help the organizations that we're in become better, uplift the people around us, make real positive impact.
Really, really great and inspirational. And hopefully, like you said, one person at a time, hopefully will take positive steps in their life. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. Thank you. And how could people follow you on social and learn more about you?
I try to make it really easy. It's just my name. So on social media, at Adam Mendler on all platforms. You want to find me on LinkedIn, just my name, Adam Mendler, Instagram, Twitter, at Adam Mendler. And if you want to find more about me, you can go to adammendler.com. 30-Minute Mentors is all spelled out, the word 30-Minute Mentors. Go to 30minutementors.com, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
Moshe, this was a pleasure. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you to your listeners.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Adam. Before we say goodbye, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'd be grateful for a like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, feel free to leave a rating and review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.